Let's have the conversation with two gentlemen who have joined us. Okiti is convener Africa Business Convention, and he's also Chief Executive Officer, Think Business Africa Limited. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
As well as Mr. Peter Esele, former President, Trade Union Congress. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. He joins us from our Abuja studio. Okay, let me begin with you, Mr. Okiti. First of all, what do you make of this debate? We thought we were done with it.
I don't think there's a way we would have been done with it, given what has happened in the last 3 years. And what I mean by that is that we had the removal of fuel subsidy, of course, on the day of inauguration. Then 2 weeks after, we had the liberalization of the exchange rate. So if you look at what has happened in the economy in the last 3 years, we've had what I call the most consequential economic period in Nigeria's history. So I am not surprised that the forthcoming election, that's the 2027 election, would definitely be fought on the basis of what has happened in the last 3 years. So I'm not surprised that we are not done with it.
Well, Mr. Sele, your thoughts? Because one of the arguments that's already out there is that we know that even though the president made the announcement that was not in his speech, subsidy is gone, he prefaced that statement by saying that the administration that just ended already terminated the subsidy regime by June of the same year, 2023. But here we are, everyone still credits the president with removing subsidy, when actually the previous administration did not budget for it beyond 6 months. So I don't know if you think that's a valid conversation valid perspective to the conversation, so there is a better understanding of what the issues are, Mr. Esele.
I would say just based on what you said, I thought this subsidy debate was over. And fortunately, Pengassin is going to have a new president today, and he's going to be welcome to the subsidy debate again. But one thing is very clear. Whether we go back to subsidizing petrol or we remove subsidy, as we have done already, what we should be asking ourselves is the vehicle. I think that's where the problem is. The system, the structure, and the process to make sure that the benefit of subsidy removal cascade down to the ordinary man on the street. Once that is not done, then we are going to have this debate, and it's good that we're having it's becoming an issue for the 2027 election. It's going to be something that is going to be much talked about. But again, we also need to separate the grains from the chaff, so that people will better understand and assimilate where we are going, and also give the politicians the issue for them to have an understanding of what it is. I think the problem we have, whether subsidy is removed or subsidy is there, is the problem of governance.
So talk to us from what you know. I mean, having been president of TUC, you have been frontal, you have a first-hand information of what the issues are as far as this fuel subsidy regime issue is concerned. What exactly was subsidy? Now that it's also biting, there are those who will also reference the fact that it's because, you know, of this subsidy removal that states now get a lot more resources than they used to get before. So give us an understanding of what the subsidy was and what has happened and what is supposed to be happening that is not happening, and who should we be calling out?
Okay. First thing is subsidy. Crude oil is traded in US dollars. It's not traded in naira. Crude oil is an international commodity, which invariably means that you buy a liter of petrol, or you buy crude. Let's say you buy a crude for $100. And then you now, that $100, if you convert it at 1,500 or 1,400, that gives you about 140,000. And then you have to bring it to the country And then you have to now look at insurance, you have to look at freight, and by the time you now take away the cost, all of the cost element away from it, then that now becomes what you are going to pay. So if at the end of the day, the pump price goes for, you're supposed to buy a liter of petrol for 500 naira, and then the government now says, no, you are now going to buy it at 300 naira. So the difference between that 500 and 300 naira is where the subsidy comes in. So that's where the government is subsidizing. Now, state governors are getting more money, federal government is getting more money. So I made reference earlier on that the challenge we face is actually the governance issues. And when I say governance issues, I mean if we have an omnibus plan, what's the plan? There's no single state in Nigeria that has an effective transport system. The cost of living we're talking about is between cost of transportation and rent. So if you are able to take care of transportation especially, I support subsidizing transportation. It's done all over the world. As civilized, if we want to civilize in quote, we all make reference, if, you know, those days when they want to take away subsidy, they call America and they call European countries. If you go to UK, for example, you come down from Heathrow, you alight from Heathrow, you have multiple avenues for you to go back into town. You either go by tube, or you go by taxi, or you go by chauffeur-driven car, depending on what you want. But in Nigeria, we don't have any of those alternatives. So whose responsibility it is to make that happen? It's the responsibility of the state government. Now, let me just give you a simple analysis of what is playing out now. The 5 states already, you have Sokoto, you have Cross River, you have Ogun State, you have Enugu, and I still have some couple of states that are coming up to set up an airline. So please ask me what you are doing with an airline in a country where you say 70% of us live above poverty line. So just ask. So now the amount of money that is meant for, that should have gone for making an effective transportation for the ordinary man, you're not using it to even favor the privileged ones like you and I. If you want to fly, the average cost of a return ticket from Lagos to Abuja is about 300,000. That's not for the ordinary man to undertake. So we also need to answer some of these questions. The whole country, the movement of passenger traffic in all Nigeria airports is about 17 million. That 17 million, you have 4.3 million international travels, and the local travels is about 12 million. Now, situate that 12 million inside 200 million people. So you now find out that these are where the challenges are. Our priorities, we are not getting it right.
Okay,
so just
one quick issue before we bring it to Mr.
That is an area we should be looking at.
Yeah, just one issue before Mr. Okiti comes back in. And I'm going to be very, very direct. There are rumors that I think it's the presidency that is trying to defend that now. Even I think it's the camp of Alhaji Atiku-Abubakar who holds the position that the federal government is still surreptitiously paying subsidy. What are your thoughts on that? Do you agree?
If the federal government is doing that, I don't think that is visible in the way it is. If they are paying subsidy, how are they paying the subsidy? Because we only have one means of getting things in now. I think Dangote Refinery is even the major ones now supplying petrol. So I'm not aware. It may be a rumor, but from my finding in the industry, I don't think that is doable. But again, I'm happy that we're having this conversation so that it comes up, people now know that, okay, who do we hold accountable for all of this? State government has a role, federal government has a role, local government have a role.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Sele. Let me come to you, Dr. Okiti. The presidency claims that a lot has been saved since the removal of subsidy. About 15.8 trillion naira was saved between mid-2023 and late 2025. From the macroeconomic perspective, can we trace these savings to Nigeria's infrastructure, healthcare, and all those other things that the government usually promises that if we have the fundings, we will do for you? Or does the public skepticism have financial merit? to all of these things? What do you think?
And that is why I said this debate, I mean, was not going to go away, because we've had 3 years of the most consequential economic period in Nigeria's history. So, and I think it's important that we go back to some period before that May 29 in 2023. One, the first thing was that all the major presidential candidates actually said they will remove fuel subsidy. I mean, but they were all doing it from one narrow perspective, which was the fiscal implications. And that is where most Nigerians limit the understanding of the removal of fuel subsidy. But the fuel subsidy does not only have fiscal implications. It has fiscal implications, but it also has implications, economic implications. And when we talk about economic implications, we're talking about investment, growth, and jobs. So those are two things. You have fiscal implications, and that is what Mr. Esele has been talking about. So if you talk about fiscal implication, the net effect, in fact, from the scorecard released by the federal government in the last week, the net effect, you will say, probably has been even negative. Because, okay, the savings from fuel subsidy, you've used it for increase in wages, some of infrastructure, some has gone to the states, and obviously all these things. I mean, we can debate how they are used, like you said, governance issues. But as an economist, my focus will be on the long-term economic implications. Because the reason why it's very important to look at the long-term implications, that means in relation to investment, growth, and jobs, is because for over 40 years that we had that subsidy, what we did not know, the counterfactual that was not available to us, is that we destroyed that sector, the opportunities in that sector completely. You know, at one point we were even producing, at one point we could not even produce. We started importing everything that we used. What that means is that there was no investment in Nigeria, there was no economic growth from that process, and it means that there were no jobs. So when we now talk of the removal of fuel subsidy, you will say, oh, people will say, okay, look at, oh, the Dangote refinery, oh, it was already in place before they removed the subsidy. However, there is no way the Dangote refinery would have survived without the removal of fuel subsidy. And the people talking about returning that fuel subsidy now, we will need to understand what kind of arrangement they want to put in place. Because let me just quickly talk about one anomaly, for instance. Let's assume you even successfully negotiate with domestic producers, because it's not only Dangote. Let's say you successfully negotiate with domestic and say you want to pay subsidy. Let's say you pay subsidy of 400 naira or per liter. What happens to our border? You know, when those petrol start going again across the border, what happens to that? Are we going to be paying the subsidy for neighboring countries as well? Then what happens to the investment made by these refineries? For instance, just only stick to Dangote. We had a 20 billion investment, let's say, in the last 3 years. Now, looking to expand the same refinery and looking to put up a similar refinery in East Africa, those investments would not have been possible. Now you have all over, everyone wanting to invest. The reason they want to invest, they want to invest the 5 billion, whether it's 20 billion you call it, is because we have removed subsidy. So the economic opportunities in terms of investment, in terms of growth, and in terms of jobs are now clear. Are they sufficient yet? No. But in the long term, these are the things that removal of fuel subsidy has made possible. And this would not have been possible if we did not remove the subsidy.
Now, those who would also reference the fact that while the subsidy removal is there, you talked about the fiscal, effect and all of that. As an economist, and I'm glad you are one, at the end of the day, it's the private economy of the individual that is important to them.
Absolutely.
So if you remove fuel subsidy, and the ripple effect is not just it's a billowing effect into my pocket.
It's not that ripple.
They're not just ripples, they are billowing effects, and such that, as Chief Wazirike said the other time, what 7,000 naira could buy some 5, 6, 7, maybe 10 years ago, 70,000 naira may not even be able to purchase it now. So at the end of the day, it's the effect on the people. And it would seem like the effect was either not considered or not being cushioned for one reason or the other.
Okay, so I'm not going to sit down here and deny that, because, I mean, I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it. So we call it the bread and butter economics. So the bread and butter, and that is why I said, in terms of welfare gains, is virtually non-existent. In fact, it's like we have gone backwards. However, that is if you look at it only from the assumption that the reason we are where we are is only because of the removal of fuel subsidy. That's not the truth. It's not. It's a complex mix of the removal of subsidy, right? The liberalization of the exchange rate, the poor structural foundations of the economy when it comes to power, transport, logistics. The structure were already bad. So when you now remove first subsidy and liberalize the exchange rate, you can then imagine the chaos. So that's one. But there is one dimension which Mr. Esele mentioned, which we should not forget. And that is the crux of the matter. He calls it governance. I will call it the weak, indisciplined fiscal expenditure framework of this country. Because that is the only reasons why the gains are not translating to the individual welfare gains. Until we see a process, whether I call it governance process, systemic process, a system where you can really see that each government expenditure, when it goes up like this, we can see how it becomes welfare gains for the ordinary man, then we'll continue to struggle. But that was not because first subsidy was removed. That has always been the case.
Okay.
And I'm not saying that the current government should not do anything about it. I'm just saying it wasn't because of the removal of first subsidy.
Now, to the governors, it will seem like you and Mr. Esele exchange notes as far as, the governance issues are concerned. So I'm going to put it to you, Mr. Esele, direct. You talked about macro and micro economic issues the other time. Everybody knows that the federal government holds the ace when it comes to macroeconomic issues. But the micros, there's those who expect that since the states now get a lot more resources, some of the things that Dr. Okiti here is mentioning about the trickle-down effect should have been done more by the states because they now have a lot more resources. And you said it the other time, that instead of paying attention to the things that will affect the common man directly, we're still seemingly appealing to the elites. How do you think these issues need to be addressed in a way that Nigerians understand what the issues are? The bitter pill is a bitter pill. Nobody likes a bitter. I don't like taking injections. But I must take injections if I must take injections. And it will seem like I've also heard that it's something that all men dread. I don't know whether it's the truth. So in what ways should we be communicating to the people these two sides, the Atiku side and the presidency side of this issue, so that we know, because whether we like it or not, they're going to form part of the things that will make up the conversations in the build-up to this election.
Yes, thank you very much. I think one of the things that the current administration lack, which is also something I will also go back to say when we also had President Jonathan, is that they just don't know how to communicate. You see, one of the biggest problems we have is your ability to communicate. And communication is a two-way thing, to communicate effectively. And what this administration does most times is that their communication, I will put it in a way that is combative. Just come out and let the people know. Yes, you take away subsidy. Once you take away subsidy, you float your currency. It's not going to be manner in this administration has only been there 3 years. Sometimes when I hear some commentaries, I'm wondering, it's as if the administration has been there for 10 years. They are just 3 years old, and they've taken a decision that no president in Nigeria has ever taken. And then there's going to be pain. It's going to be associated with pain. But what I expect this government to do would have been be upfront with it. Tell the people, oh, we are taking this away This is what is going to happen. And then also now tell them this is where we are going. In 10 years, you can do short term, medium term, long term. And then people now have KPIs to judge you. It's okay, are you achieving all of this? And if there are areas that you see that there are also gaps, you reach out to the state governors. And one thing that we are talking about politics and we're talking about campaigns. I think all the political parties are equally the same. Okiti said something about the last election. Everybody says they were going to take away subsidy. Even when I was talking to the union, when this whole thing started and we were having a debate, and I was like, the president campaigned that he was going to take away subsidy. He said he was also going to float his currency. And you guys elected him. So if he's been elected by Nigerian people, why saying all of this? Then the union should also give him the benefit of a doubt and let's see how his 100 days honeymoon will go. And the president took advantage of his 100 days honeymoon period. So the most important thing is, first, you have to communicate. Be upfront. Let people know this is what is coming. And when you know, okay, they made reference to investment in the economy. I'm in that sector, and I know that the last 3 years has been better than 10 years, more than 10 years in that sector. There's huge investment inflow coming into the oil and gas right now. And there are still many more coming in. Now, how do we now cascade this to the ordinary man on the street? Because if I'm telling somebody that we are having investment of about $30 billion coming into the oil and gas industry because of subsidy removal, the man wants to know, how does that benefit me? So that now comes to where you now situate, what are the governors doing? I can't stop talking about it. What are the governors doing? What are the local government chairmen doing? Because the federal government is the macro side of the economy. Why the micro side of the economy is actually the local and the state government. So if they are not doing anything and just doing whatever they like with the money and building airlines and constructing, and nobody is saying anything. I've always said, it's civil society in all the states. You don't hear them challenge. I also spoke to TUC chairman in some of these states, and I said, you guys don't talk about it. You don't look at the budget of the state government. It's easier for everybody to abuse the president, abuse the federal government, but nobody is doing similar thing. So for me, the federal government, first thing they must do is to communicate effectively. Tell people the way it is. You just made reference to taking an injection. I don't enjoy it either. But the doctor had to explain to me the importance of me having to take this injection and what would it do to my head, short term, medium term, long term. So government should let us know. I have 4 kids. If government is talking about this is what is going to happen to my children, and I see that, oh, it's looking good for them, then it becomes easier for me to swallow what it is. But if government is not communicating effectively, not coming up front to tell people this is what it is, we may just walk into another cul-de-sac, because politics is not won by the best candidate. Politics is won by somebody who's able to appeal to the emotions and propaganda of the people.
Right. Dr. Okiti, I mean, let me stay with that analogy of injection that you guys are scared of, right? Apart from...
We guys.
You said men are scared of
your
injection.
husband.
Right, because what usually happens is that, he just said about, if the doctor had to tell him that, this is what the injection will do for you if you only sit down and take it, but they had to explain to him. But what they should also explain is, just like economic reforms, the initial pain. That's one of the reasons people are scared of injections. The first prick, the initial pain, and then when they pull out the needle, that also is very painful. I've taken a number of injections, so I know. I think that's where the communication he's talking about should have taken place. There will be initial pains, and then after a while, everything will work itself out, but it will take a while, to do that.
I understand. I mean, I'm a policy communications person, and I understand when people say the government is not communicating. However, they may communicate and people are not hearing.
Yeah.
No, sir.
No, I'm coming. No, I'm not giving an excuse here. I said they may communicate and people are not hearing.
I just want to delineate a difference.
Yeah.
There is information. And there's communication.
Okay.
Information is just the fact. Communication is a process.
It's a process. Exactly. Okay. They may share some information and people are not listening because the communication is a long thing. Okay. So where we are now, at the moment, we must understand. That is why I agreed that the government has to be a bit empathetic. We must agree that Nigerians are in pain. The cost of living crisis is a major crisis. However, if there's any point I want anyone to take out of my own conversation here, it is that we can't trace the cause of where we are now to only the removal of fuel subsidy. Yeah. Because if we do that, we are going to be creating another layer and a bigger layer of problem if we just say, oh, restore fuel subsidy and we will all be fine. We will not all be fine just by restoring fuel subsidy. It can happen. So it's a very complex thing. So you have to talk of, the money that goes to states. Is it spent? What is it used for? Like you have alluded to. You have to now say what's happened, for instance, to investments that have been made on the basis of the removal of fuel subsidy. What's happened to the gains of our foreign reserves? Many people think it's not connected. It is. It is connected to it. What's happened to it? And if we remove subsidy, what would that arrangement look like? So that is one foundation. The other element then is now going to the bread and butter that you are talking about. The bread and butter is that fiscal framework, fiscal expenditure framework I talked about. Whether you say the federal, that's one dimension. The states, that's another dimension. The local government, then that is another dimension. So if you look at the states, for instance, I don't even want to mention any state. I don't want to mention, but we must ask ourselves a very, very simple question. When people ask, what do you mean by this discipline, in fiscal framework? I say it's very, very simple. Look around you. Anybody that has gone into government at a very, very high level, whether it's local government, whether it's state government, whether it's federal government, how come they suddenly become wealthy? I'm not saying it's corruption, I'm not saying it's waste, and I'm not saying it's leakages. But how come they suddenly become wealthy? How come when people hear, oh, you are now in government, how come they get excited? Yeah. Why don't they get excited that you're working in channels? So it means that for the entire country, if we don't fix the way we get money and the way we spend it, to ensure that that process, everyone is taken care of in that process, whether it's in relation to infrastructure, whether it's in relation to housing, whether it's in relation to transport, it just means that a governor goes in without a plan. How much do we have in this treasury? Oh, I want to establish an airline. That is what I now like. Do you get my point? And nobody, not even the State House of Legislature, can say no. So it is that process, that indisciplined process, that is the reason why, whether it is subsidy, whether it's liberalization of it, if we keep increasing government's revenue, and we can increase it forever, we will not see the effect on the ordinary Nigerians. Except we fix that process and say, look, we have a very disciplined process of how we make money and how we spend the money. So I'm just responding. It's not about subsidy, and I'm not saying subsidy should not be, of course, subsidy should not even go back. There's no debate about that. And that is why my focus is on the economic opportunities created by that. Because that is one area people are not looking at. So why we have problem with the way government resources is earned and spent, I don't have any issue at all about the economic opportunities, the investment opportunities, the growth opportunities, and of course the jobs opportunities created by that policy.
Right. So, Mr. Sele, sometimes, we think of it this way, between the devil and the deep blue sea. Subsidy was there when, before the former President Buhari removed it from just before he left office, and people complained about a cabal. The rich getting richer, those people, the ones collecting the subsidies are just, collecting all that money, but the people were enjoying the benefits of paying lower cost of fuel. And then subsidy is gone. And of course, the pump price of fuel increased, and then people are complaining, we're suffering the high cost of living. So, I mean, a lot of economists are saying the subsidy should not come back. But then again, the people are complaining that we're suffering too much. You know, where should we be in all of this? What do you think, should happen if you're talking to the people? Are you going to tell them to please wait a little while longer, things will get better, or what are you going to tell the government, advise the government to do in this at this period in time?
I think it's a catch-22 position, but one thing is very clear. I made reference to governance issues. I was just trying to be very diplomatic in a way by using the word governance issues. And it also now comes to our values. A lot of this problem we are talking about, Okiti is talking about indiscipline in our fiscal way of conducting ourselves. But it all comes down to our values. If we value hard work, we value people earning their income, you find out that we will not have a lot of these issues that we're dealing with. The fact is, what are our values? Okiti made reference to the fact that you suddenly get into government and you become very wealthy. How do you know that government is a business in itself? Getting into government is a business in itself. Is that once somebody is elected, you get 1,001 congratulatory messages. So that stems from values. So when somebody comes in, and this guy, before he became a councillor, he's on a bike and suddenly becomes a councillor and he's not driving a Lexus 570. And the next thing we all gather to give him a chieftaincy title. That is also part of our values. And then what now comes, that now dovetail, politicians don't give you what you deserve. Politicians give you who you are. Because what politicians want, they want power. And they can tell you what you want to hear. They can give you what you want in order to get that power. So if we are not asking them, that's where it's also very important for Nigerians to also stand up for themselves. It's not only government. Every time we say government, what about we? What are we standing for? What is important to us? What do we think about our children? So when we are able to take that to heart, you are going to find out that things will gradually change. Am I going to say we should go back to subsidy? I would not be a party to that. Because I'm in that industry and I know what happened in that subsidy regime. Not a single person was prosecuted. We keep saying people were stealing our money and we were subsidizing the entire West Africa. Yes, that's true. But what the union kept emphasizing at that time was that, okay, please put up an effective transport system. Let us know what we benefit in terms of healthcare. And all of these that we've talked about, when I started, I used the word system, structure, and process. So the vehicle you made available will determine your system, will determine your structure, and will determine your process. If we live in a society of anyhowness, whether we take away subsidy, whether we bring back subsidy, the anyhowness will reflect in how we conduct ourselves and will reflect in the standard of living. I still can't understand why I was born in Benin City. There used to be bus parks. You know where to come, you know where to disembark, where to board. Our streets were numbered. You could get a letter. And we may think that those things are not important. But those things are a rather systemic decay that also now dovetail whether subsidy or no subsidy. So that's why I thought we must look at the economy from a composite perspective. And if we're able to look at it from a composite perspective, then our values will now drive how clean our society becomes. And also now determine who becomes our president, who becomes our governor, who becomes our local government chairman. Okay. All of these, there's the economic side of politics, I agree, and there's the political economic side of politics. Okiti is an economist, I know, but I also know that the president will also, whoever wants to be president of Nigeria, will not only be interested in the political side of politics or the economic side of the society, but he will be interested in the economic side of the politics. Economics will also say all things being equal, but the president himself and politicians know that all things are never equal. So it's to find the balance between all things being equal and to make sure that the future of Nigerians are guaranteed. And then that way, let's hope they can win an election.
Okay. Before we, because we are coming to, the chicken is coming home to roost, so to speak now. Would you say then that this conversation between Alhaji Atiku Abubakar's camp and the presidency is all political talk? or just some conversation that needs to be had? Because the PIA is already explicit on whether or not subsidy is a thing to be considered, isn't it?
Yes. The PI is very clear. The PI is a law. It's a law now. So would I say it's a political talk? I wouldn't want to go into that side of politics so that you don't end up offending somebody, don't start feeling that you are undermining what they are putting forward. No. I would say it's a conversation that we should have, and it's a conversation that the Atiku camp will come up and then explain further, because the Nigerians are going to ask a lot of questions. How do you intend to do it? And then it's also an opportunity for the current administration to also now communicate. I'm happy the way you define communication and information. What the government have been doing is actually be informing Nigeria. They've not been communicating. So let's hope that this will now, both sides will now come up to not tell us, okay, how do you intend, if you want to bring back subsidy, how do you intend to do it? These are the investments that the removal of subsidy have brought into the country, and this ABCD has been the benefit. And then you that took away the subsidy, you also have to explain what has been the benefit and how you expect all of this to cascade down to the ordinary man in the short term, medium term, and the long term. So I think it's a better conversation. It's a good conversation to have.
Okay.
And at the end of the day, people will be better informed to decide where they want to go. Okay.
Well, Dr. Kitty, the presidency argues that PIA already dismantled, the subsidy regime. So the question then I would want to ask you is, if a government or anyone attempts to restore this subsidy in any way, manner, shape, or form, what are the structural or legal risks to investor confidence?
If I were in the presidency, I wouldn't even go that road to be explaining that PIA. Yes, we all know that, but that's not what I would say. I would just go and say, look, this is our policy. We believe in the policy. We believe it's best for Nigerians. And I still believe it's the best thing for Nigerians in the long term, like I said, because of the economic opportunities that it creates. So in terms of the legal risk and whatever it is, we will also look at it from the investor perspective that you said. So the outlook for investment today in Nigeria is better than it was 3 years ago. Just talk to any investor, whether he's domestic or international investor. The outlook is better. Then we must understand why. Why is the outlook better? For two major reasons, for two major planks of reforms undertaken by the government, which is the removal of fuel subsidy, which created a level playing field and opportunities in the oil and gas sector. Then the second one is the liberalization of the Naira exchange rate, because also it means that the Naira can go up, the Naira can go down, and it enables the private investors to plan ahead. All the government needs to do and focus on is ensure macroeconomic stability. And when we talk of macroeconomic stability, we're talking about two metrics, mainly two metrics: inflation numbers and, of course, the exchange rate. When I mean focus, they are the things there are things that they have to do to ensure that those conditions will continue to improve those conditions. And investors understand that. So once those two elements are in place, investors now look at their home private metrics and say, okay, on the basis of this is what we can plan in 2, 3 years, 5 years time. When a government, or if a government now says, look, we're going to return to the era of fuel subsidy, or we're going to return to the era of a managed and fixed exchange rate, I can assure you what that would do is that before election, domestic and international investors would just say, okay, let's wait and see. Wait and see means that who wins the election. Of course, if this president is returned, then they know, okay, we are not going back to that era. But if a new president comes in, a new president that have said that this is what they would do, then of course it's a huge risk. You risk it, whether in the short term or even in the medium term.
Yes, I was going to ask that.
Because you want to really take us back to where we don't want to go. The issue is, as the conversation here is, how do we manage the current conditions better? How do we improve the life of Nigerians?
Especially because, as far as some people are concerned, even though fuel subsidy has been removed, there have been gains. Joke just read out the numbers to us, 15.8 trillion naira.
Yeah.
Accountability is an issue that the opposition is asking questions about.
I don't necessarily say accountability is an issue, and I will tell you what I mean by that, because
they are asking questions around transparency. That's what I mean.
Well, there will always be issue of transparency, but there's also been cost. I mean, wage increases, and some of these costs also came from exchange rate changes. Then, of course, the cost of government debt also went up because of exchange rate changes. So that's why I call it a complex mix of things that happened after those reforms were. So we can't just say, because the moment you use the word, that's why I don't use the word corruption, I don't use the word leakages, and I don't use anymore. I used to use them. I now call it indiscipline, because that process is not tight enough.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, if that process is tight enough, and there's a discipline process, right? Sorry, let me just quickly say this, because I think this is probably, when we talk about economic entities, we talk about the household, we talk about the business, and we talk about the government. It is the same budget constraint. A family comes together and say, okay, this is our income for the year. What do we spend it on, right? And I believe we are all parents. When you decide on Monday that this is what we are spending it on, then we have to, does the dad or the mom just go out the next day and buy a new car or buy a new wardrobe? Do you get my point? So it doesn't happen. If that does not happen, because if it doesn't happen, it's because if it happens, it's indiscipline. So in terms of government as well, how do we ensure at every level of government that we have some kind of discipline process, both in terms of the conceptualization, both in terms of the deliberation, and of course, both in terms of the expenditure of the money that comes into government, and even in the accumulation of debt. When we have some discipline, I bet you we will see some of this improvement, and we will see that the resources that belongs to everyone, that there's an element that you can say, okay, this is because the government did this came to me, this came to me.
Okay.
But when we don't have that discipline process, then everything looks very, very chaotic. And I think that's what, and for investors, that is also what they don't like.
Okay.
But at least they can undo the removal of subsidy, the exchange rate. They are waiting for the other bit, which is the progress we need to make.
Okay.
But not to return to the darkness.
Mr. Sele, lastly, Dr. Kitty has spoken about transparency. There are questions around transparency concerning the savings from the subsidy, if any. What are your thoughts on that? What would you recommend that government does? You have spoken about the need for them to communicate, fine. But in terms of transparency, the questions still linger.
Well, it still boils down to, we have by law, we have all the laws. I think in some of the programs I've always emphasized that when it comes to documentation, when it comes to things on paper, we are a first world country. But actually, when it comes to implementation and execution, that is where we actually come into, you can say we are a third world country. So everything that we have in our laws to take care of whatever it is that we're going to do. It's our inability to respect the law. Okiti was talking about indiscipline. Yes, that's part of the problem, but the fact is that why are you not disciplined? It has to come from value. And I keep emphasizing that. Why are you not disciplined? It comes from your value. Why are you not disciplined? It comes from your environment. So what do I expect government to do going forward? Is to also design an omnibus plan where the federal government and the state government and the local government now comes together and say, okay, what is the major problem facing the average Nigerian? Now we've all agreed that it's tough out there. And then you now look at it. If you ask me from my own, even from personal interaction, the key here is transportation and rent.
Okay.
But especially transportation. For people living in a particular area, 70% or more of their salary goes for transportation. So if you want to subsidize, I think we can look at that area of transportation and find ways of subsidizing that. So if that is taken care of, it also serves as a buffer for people to look forward and know that, okay, yes, things things will be tough. Things are going to be hard.
You know, what's also interesting, my apologies,
in the long run,
Mr.
it's what is
Sele.
best for the country.
Yeah,
Thank you.
What's also interesting is that on the one hand, it is one thing for government to say, or any government to say, okay, this is the intervention we're bringing. On the other hand, it's another thing entirely for that intervention to get to the people. We have seen that during COVID, the palliatives and the rest of them.
Yes.
You know, they don't, get to where they're supposed to go to. At the end of the day, we blame government because you give them the job. So I hope they also get that point. Thank you for your time this morning. Peter Sele is former president of Trade Union Congress. We appreciate your time and your thoughts, as well as Dr. Oko Okiti, who is convener Africa Business Convention. He's also CEO Think Business Africa Limited. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me this morning.